I watched Derek walk into the season announcement with Olivia Barrett beside him before the room settled, and every conversation around me lost its rhythm. She moved at his pace, not like a guest waiting to be introduced, but like someone already promised a place beside him. Derek stopped, met my eyes, and said, "From today forward, anything connected to me goes through Olivia." He delivered it like a scheduling update, though I was his wife and coordinating the event. Nobody challenged him, and that silence sharpened the moment because everyone understood what he was doing without forcing him to name it. People glanced toward me, expecting anger, tears, or a scene Derek could use to make himself look reasonable. I gave him none of it. Olivia accepted handshakes, while Derek kept smiling as though my refusal to react had spoiled his entrance. Then Olivia reached for the backstage door, and the credential hanging from her neck turned something personal into something operational. It was a permanent access badge, issued only to internal managers with unrestricted entry behind the house. Olivia was not an employee, had no contract, and had never been approved as production staff. I knew because access authorization passed through my department, and her name had never appeared on a request. She pressed the badge against the reader, and the light flashed green before the lock released. Derek watched her disappear backstage, which told me he knew the credential worked. I stayed where I was, listening to him greet sponsors while the door closed behind the woman he had chosen to stand beside. My marriage was intact on paper, but the question was hanging from Olivia's neck. I did not follow her or confront Derek because the badge had done what an argument could not. It proved someone with management authority had bypassed approval and granted an outside producer unrestricted access. Derek could call the affair private, complicated, or misunderstood, but he could not explain away a system record. By walking Olivia into that building, he had carried the first piece of evidence inside himself. The moment the announcement ended, I went to Gabriel Price, the senior technical manager who controlled every credential issued through the building. I asked him to check Olivia Barrett's access history without changing or deleting anything. He pulled up the system, found the badge number, and his expression tightened before he turned the monitor toward me. "This was activated through Derek's management account," he said, "and there's no contractor agreement attached to it." Gabriel checked again against the vendor registry and temporary staffing list, but Olivia's name appeared nowhere. The credential had unrestricted backstage access, not the limited entry normally given to outside producers during approved events. I asked whether someone could have clicked the wrong permission level, and he shook his head because permanent credentials required separate confirmation from the issuing manager. Nothing about that badge had happened by accident. Derek arrived before Gabriel could close the record, already wearing the calm expression he used whenever he expected people to accept his explanation. "It's an administrative mistake," he said, barely looking at the screen. I asked who had made the mistake, and he answered that someone in technical operations must have processed the wrong request during a busy week. Gabriel stayed silent, but the open record showed no request, no approval chain, and no employee name except Derek's. Then an automated confirmation appeared in the audit history, generated when the credential was activated and stored beyond the reach of edits. It showed Derek's account, his digital signature, Olivia's badge number, and the exact permission level he had approved. Derek leaned closer and called it a system glitch, but Gabriel explained that the signature could only appear after Derek completed the second authorization step. I looked at the screen, then at Derek, and felt the distance between his words and the record settle into place. A software error might create a duplicate entry or delay a notification, but it could not choose his credentials and complete his authorization. I did not accuse him because the evidence had already answered the only question that mattered. Derek had not merely brought Olivia backstage, he had personally given her the key. I filed the conflict of interest report before Derek could turn the badge into gossip about our marriage. I did not mention the affair, Describe Olivia Barrett as the woman beside my husband, or ask anyone to judge what happened between us. I documented one question: how an outside producer received unrestricted management access without completing the required approval process. By afternoon, Regional Compliance Director Elaine Foster had opened a formal review. Elaine collected the credential history, vendor submissions, and partnership records, separating every personal claim from the procedures she could verify. Derek insisted Olivia had only been helping with future programming and that the paperwork would follow once the partnership became official. Elaine kept reading and answered, "Future discussions do not replace procurement requirements." The room quieted because she had reduced his explanation to the one rule he could not avoid. Olivia entered her interview composed. With none of the confusion Derek seemed to expect her to perform, she acknowledged knowing he held authority over vendor approvals and explained, "Derek assured me the remaining documents could be completed after selection." Elaine recorded the statement, then compared Olivia's submission dates with the preserved procurement timeline. Olivia never claimed innocence, and she never pretended she misunderstood the advantage she received. The review changed direction when Elaine reached the final evaluation records from the previous season. Several qualified production companies had submitted complete applications on time, yet they were removed before the final review without another opportunity to respond. Olivia's company had missed required documents, but her portal remained open after the deadline until every missing item appeared. Derek called it routine flexibility, though the electronic history displayed each extension beside the original closing date. No one raised a voice because the dates had settled the argument. Every other applicant had been judged by the deadline, while Olivia alone had been allowed to complete her submission after everyone else was locked out. I looked across the table at Derek and understood the badge had exposed only the first breach. The contracting records showed he had not opened one door for Olivia. He had quietly closed several doors for everyone else. Derek waited until the compliance meeting was nearly over before sliding a one-page statement across the table toward me. It claimed every partnership decision involving Olivia had been made with my knowledge and consent, both as his wife and operations manager. Sign it. Natalie. And this stops becoming a bigger problem. He pressed, keeping his voice low. I read the first paragraph, placed the page back between us, and answered, "I'm not signing something that rewrites my role." Elaine Foster remained at the end of the table while company counsel reviewed the wording and asked Derek who had prepared it. He avoided the question and turned toward me. "You knew Olivia was helping with programming," he insisted. But I answered, "Knowing her name is not approving her access or contracts." Counsel asked whether I had authorized her credentials, extended a deadline, or approved a vendor exception, and I answered no each time. Derek leaned forward, his calm thinning. "We made these decisions together," he said. "You cannot separate yourself now because the review feels uncomfortable." Marcus Doyle, the labor attorney advising me, did not argue or offer a speech. He asked Elaine to preserve the full edit history for every document Derek had attributed to me. The records opened in sequence, showing when each form was created, revised, and submitted. My account had logged out hours before the changes that added Olivia's permissions and extended her submission access. Derek pointed at my name in the header, but Marcus answered, "A name on the form is not the same as a verified edit." Elaine expanded the audit trail, and every disputed change traced back to Derek's account after my sessions ended. The room went still because the timeline removed the version he needed me to sign. I had not approved the exceptions, and I had not been present when the records were altered. Derek looked at the unsigned statement between us, then at the edit history on the screen. He had asked me to confirm a shared decision, but the system showed he had acted alone from the beginning. Olivia stopped defending Derek the morning compliance ordered every procurement email, calendar invitation, and internal message preserved exactly as they existed. She did not accuse him or apologize to me because neither of those choices protected her future. She asked Elaine one question instead. If I cooperate, will my statement be reviewed on its own? Elaine answered that every participant would be judged by documented conduct, not personal loyalty. Derek reacted differently. He walked from office to office, insisting the review had become political and that routine business decisions were being turned into misconduct because people wanted someone to blame. Before the day ended, he contacted members of the operations team and encouraged them to correct meeting dates that no longer reflected how discussions had actually happened. Several employees reported those conversations immediately because the preservation notice had already instructed everyone not to alter existing records. The system captured each attempted revision the moment it was submitted, even though none of the changes became permanent. Gabriel Price preserved the new activity logs alongside the earlier procurement history and confirmed they had all occurred after the compliance review officially began. Derek insisted he was only fixing administrative mistakes, but the timestamps showed the edits were created after every original record had already been secured. The review no longer depended only on old decisions because new actions were creating fresh evidence. Elaine returned with the updated log history before anyone needed another interview. These requests were made after the preservation order, she said, placing the timeline beside the original procurement records. Derek looked toward Olivia, expecting support. But she remained silent because every attempted correction now carried his own account credentials. A preserved record could explain what happened. Yet another preserved record now showed someone trying to change what had already been preserved. I watched the room settle around documents instead of arguments, and understood why nobody needed to speculate anymore. The original procurement history had already established exceptions that favored Olivia, and the new activity logs established attempts to rewrite those same events after the investigation began. Every timestamp connected to Derek's account without interruption. The earlier records showed how the process had been bypassed, and the newer records showed he still believed the system could be persuaded to forget what it had already recorded. Elaine Foster delivered the decision without changing her tone. Derek Whitfield was placed on administrative suspension pending the completion of the conflict of interest review, and Olivia Barrett was removed from every active procurement process until the investigation concluded. Neither decision declared anyone guilty, but both followed the organization's compliance policy exactly as written. Derek looked at Elaine and asked, "You're suspending me over paperwork?" She answered, "You're being suspended because the documented record requires it." Several employees who had received Derek's request to revise meeting histories met separately with compliance that same afternoon. Each explained the messages they had received and provided them before deleting nothing, exactly as the preservation notice required. Elaine confirmed their cooperation would be considered when evaluating individual responsibility because they reported the requests instead of carrying them out. The investigation kept separating documented conduct from personal relationships, and that distinction never changed. Derek tried one final approach before leaving the building. He caught me outside the conference room and lowered his voice. "End this review, and we can settle everything else privately," he urged, then added, "Don't let our marriage destroy both of us." I answered, "The review belongs to compliance, and our marriage belongs in family court. They are not the same case." He stared at me for a moment, realizing those two paths would never cross simply because he wanted them to. Marcus Doyle met me afterward to discuss the divorce filing, already waiting to move forward. He reminded me that the compliance investigation and the dissolution of our marriage would remain separate legal matters under different procedures, regardless of how often Derek tried to blend them together. That separation mattered because no settlement between us could erase employment records, and no workplace finding could decide the terms of a divorce. When I walked out of the building, Derek was no longer directing partnerships or deciding who entered another meeting. Olivia had already been removed from every pending selection process, and the vendors whose applications remained under review would be evaluated again, without the exceptions that had favored her company. Behind me, the investigation continued through its own process. And ahead of me, the divorce continued through another. For the first time since Derek walked into that announcement beside Olivia, neither path depended on anything he wanted. The divorce mediation lasted less than an hour because neither of us challenged facts already established outside that room. Derek arrived tired, carrying none of the confidence he had worn at the season announcement. When the mediator confirmed every remaining issue had been resolved, Derek met my eyes and asked, "Does this really have to keep going?" I answered, "It isn't mine to stop anymore." He followed me into the hallway after the papers were signed, lowering his voice as though privacy could restore control. "People have made their point," he said. "You don't have to let them finish ruining my career." I kept walking and answered, "I never directed the investigation. I stopped standing between you and the records." That afternoon, Elaine Foster issued the organization's final determination to everyone involved. Derek's employment was terminated for procurement violations, undisclosed conflicts of interest, and attempts to alter records after the preservation notice. Olivia Barrett was declared ineligible for contracting opportunities across the theater network because the review confirmed she had accepted preferential access and deadline extensions. Vendor selections were reopened under the original requirements, with preserved submissions returned for equal evaluation. There was no confrontation and no applause when the decision reached the staff. Employees returned to production schedules. The performance calendar remained intact, and the building continued operating without Derek at its center. The outcome looked ordinary from outside because accountability at work usually arrives through notices, access changes, and names disappearing from responsibilities. I packed my mediation copy beside my compliance notes and left my office no longer tied to Derek by work or marriage. Outside, the air felt quieter than the lobby where he had introduced Olivia beside him. Derek had lost the position he tried to protect. Olivia had lost the advantage she knowingly accepted, and the organization had corrected the process that allowed both of them through. I drove away without needing another conversation, because neither of them could bargain with the final record. Their version had ended where the documented truth began.